So today we have Andrea Gullo with us from the Puente Hills Habitat Authority, and I'm gonna let her go ahead and speak to the Habitat Authority's work and some upcoming activities that they're engaged in. Andrea, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you so much for hosting this and for asking me to speak today. It's a pleasure to be here with you and everybody else. I'm going to try and share my screen and get started from there. Let me hit from beginning. Okay. Do you see is the screen, it's taking up the whole screen. Okay.
Yes.
So as Melanie mentioned, my name is Andrea Gullo. I'm the Executive Director of the Puente Hills Habitat Preservation Authority. And we call ourselves the Habitat Authority for short. And yes, you see that right. We are celebrating our 30th anniversary this year. We were created in 1994. Today I want to talk a little bit about Measure pH, who we are, some preserve updates with habitat restoration, fire prevention, ranger services, and our funding challenges. And that leads us to Measure pH. So we manage about over 3,800 acres of public open space. We are a government park agency. We're a joint powers authority. And we are created, as I mentioned, in 1994 as a condition of a conditional use permit for the Puente Hills landfill. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. We restore, manage, and preserve open space. We provide outdoor recreation, and we assist with wildfire preparedness efforts and emergency response. Some of you may have been to our trailheads, which are located in City of Whittier, La Habra Heights, LA County, unincorporated areas. And we did a survey that a few years ago that said we get about 2,600 visitations a day. So numbers may have changed from then, but that's a good ballpark. To put it in perspective, our area, our jurisdiction is in the red circled area of this map, with the map is courtesy of Hills for Everyone. We are the western anchor of the Puente Chino Hills Wildlife Corridor. We are biologically connected to the Chino Hills State Park in the east, and then through Cole Canyon down to the Cleveland National Forest. As you know, what that means is wildlife knows no boundaries, and they migrate through this entire area, including mountain lions. We had a collared mountain lion in our area a couple years ago, and last year again, I believe. So this is our preserve up close. Starting off with some preserve updates, we've restored approximately 200 acres of habitat, and we're currently restoring about 112 acres for a total of 312 acres. And those areas are identified on this map in the green highlighted area all throughout the preserve. And most of this comes from outside funding sources. It costs millions of dollars to do this. It's largely through mitigation efforts. So part of that involves collecting seeds from the preserve, using them for hydroseeding, and then growing plants from those seeds to guarantee the maximum success for our restoration efforts. So basically that means taking out the weeds and the flashy fuels and replacing them with native habitat to increase biodiversity and to reduce the fire hazardness of the hills. Here's some comparative shots. On the left, you have the weeds in 2016 at two different sites. We do 2 years of site prep. And on the right, you have the third year of plant establishment in 2022. And these efforts, on average, take about 8 years total for each restoration effort. And most of our restoration is done to benefit this bird, which is the coastal California gnatcatcher, protected by the Endangered Species Act. These photos are actually taken on the preserve of our birds. We have a population here in our preserve. And so that means our restoration efforts are heavily regulated by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. A lot other things, most of what we do is based on ecological scientific principles. So part of that is monitoring the health of wildlife in relation to recreation. We do a lot of studies, and that includes wildlife camera studies. Here you have a bobcat at our Harbor Boulevard Wildlife Underpass, which is the first wildlife underpass built in Los Angeles County. And it was built in part because we'd had no evidence of bobcats safely crossing from one side of the road to the other. But of course, oops, now we do. So, and this is an ongoing monitoring effort that we have here. And let's see, here's another photo of the underpass. It just really lets you know there's real nature out there. It's survival. Coyote with a snake in his mouth wrapped around his face. We also have a great fox, and we do monitor the reproductive efforts of our wildlife out there through our cameras. This deer up in the corner on the left here is our biologist estimates to be just a few days old. So for fire prevention, with our dwindling budget over the years, we've applied for several state grants, and we were awarded about 1.2 million to help us with our fire prevention efforts. We wouldn't have normally done goat grazing if it weren't for these grants, but CAL FIRE gave us some money to do goat grazing in Turnbull Canyon. And we did that for 2 years, and that is completed. We also did goat grazing in La Habra Heights for 2 years with a grant from the Rivers and Mountains Conservancy. And we finished our second year this year. So that is done. I think I need to go to the very end with this. A lot of people like watching goats. I think it helps with them. They just enjoy watching them. There we go. Part of this, our state grants also, if it weren't for the state grants for the last 3 years, we wouldn't have had funding to do the urban wildland interface clearance. And so we've been able to do that. And I did apply for funding for this fiscal year for the same efforts, and for CAL FIRE and Rivers and Mountains Conservancy, was denied. Luckily, we have other state money for this fiscal year, but we have to figure out what we're going to do for the following fiscal year and try and find money for that. I still haven't given up. I need to apply for more grants, but so you can see grants are not reliable funding source. Because of the droughts, we had a lot of tree die-off the urban wildland interface and along our access roads. So we were lucky to have some of the grants pay for removal of about 400 dead and hazardous trees along urban wildland interface and along urban emergency access routes that we were able to remove about 400 trees. Other fire prevention activities is we partner with local agencies for a helihydrant to be placed on Habitat Authority properties. And as you can see, there's one in Yorba Linda as well. It's just to show you an example. It allows for helicopters to hover and snorkel water to allow for quicker response time. So this is a regional, this provides a regional benefit for wildland firefighting. Every year we contract with another government agency, the Mountains Recreation and Conservation Authority, to provide ranger services and maintenance, park staff. So the rangers are California peace officers. They can write tickets and make arrests. And they keep the trails safe and clean. They also are wildland firefighters. They do extra patrol on fire hazard days and carry water pump and hundreds of gallons of water on their truck for quick response. They do maintenance and repair and educational programs when funds are available. So they get to do fun things like pick up debris piles that are found on a regular basis throughout our preserve, write tickets for vehicles blocking fire gates, handle trespassers at night. This individual up in the right-hand corner happened to be homeless, so they were able to get him medical attention. They respond to fires. You can see the burnt out vehicle that was on our property this year. It could have been much worse. And they do things like stop people from collecting native habitat on our properties as well, with the long host of other things that they do, in addition to clearing emergency access routes throughout the preserve annually as well. And an important thing they do is eliminate homeless encampments. And we don't fool around with this because this is a serious wildfire hazard, because a lot of them cook at night. So we remove the encampments right away, and just try and because we have a constant presence, we don't have large encampments in the hills. It could be a lot worse. And due to limited budgets, they do provide an occasional junior ranger program. This past year, we were only able to provide 2. We used to provide a lot more. So moving on to the finances, between 1994 and 2013, about $64 million in funding was provided to our agency from solid waste disposal fee. So for every ton of trash that went into the landfill, we got $1. And we were able to, and that was a good source of revenue for quite a while. Roughly half of the 64 million has been spent on acquisition because we needed it to save what was left before it was developed. You know, acquisition is first. And the other half was put into our investment portfolio. A board member of ours, the County of Los Angeles, holds all of our funds as controller, and they invest that money in an investment portfolio for us. And we work with them to get the greatest returns possible. But the returns are not great enough to cover our basic and ongoing costs to keep the hills safe and clean. You know, we've come far. Ranger management costs continue to increase, and the investment fund is able to cover less and less each year. So the main point with this slide is that our expenses are greater than our revenue. Additional revenue sources are needed for a reliable and stable funding source to avoid further budget cuts to ranger services, fire prevention, and other top priorities. We hired an outside consulting company to look at all of our budgets, our financial records, our audits, and they concluded that we are operating in the red right now. If it weren't for the state grants helping us for the last 2-3 years, we would be in much worse condition. So the Habitat Authority, we've worked hard for many years to be live in a space that's self-sustainable. But when the recession hit in 2007, 2008, there was less trash going into the landfill. But you know, from the construction industry mainly, but we readjusted. But then 2013 came, and the landfill closed on time as promised to the community of Hacienda Heights. The Board of Supervisors made that promise. It kept its promise, which was good. But what that meant is that it closed under capacity, and we made 10 million less than we were planning on. And so, but we readjusted again. But then the pandemic hit, our investments got pulled, inflation went up, and we just haven't been able to right the ship since. So our primary funding sources have been slightly declining over the last 10 years, and we're no longer able to cover our basic services. And I've mentioned our one-time grants have been very helpful, but they're not sustainable funding sources. And our board and our consultants are saying we need reliable, stable funding sources in order to provide the basic services that we have been providing. We've tightened our belt. We've made extra budget reductions. We've already were working on a shoestring skeletal budget before all of this, but now we've taken even more steps. We've decreased ranger services, eliminated our staff that coordinated our volunteers and did our outdoor programming. And we've cut the budget wherever we could, like professional development, supplies, memberships, and annual gathering of our leadership. So what the board, after discussing this for 4 years and after looking at a lot of different ways we could address the budget issue, in July of this year, the Habitat Authority Board unanimously voted to form a legal entity called the Community Facility District. And this allows the Habitat Authority to place Measure PH for Puente Hills, Measure PH on the November 2024 election ballot. It'll need a 2/3 to pass, over 66%. So Measure PH is a special tax of 1 cent per building square foot. It's about $18 a year for the average homeowner with a home of, say if they have a home of 1,800 square feet, it'll be $18 a year. And with annual adjustments limited to 3% until it's ended by the voters. Other state park agencies up and down the state have taken similar steps. I know the MRCA has passed several community facility districts in LA County. In Northern California, they do, sales tax or other property taxes as well. So it's quite a common thing for park agencies to explore. So Measure PH, what will it do? It'll help us with clearing brush from structures and emergency access roads for first responders. It'll protect local natural lands by preventing homeless encampments, vandalism, and illegal dumping. It'll help us in maintaining trailheads, natural habitats, including our various trailheads. And it'll help us in maintaining park ranger patrols for fire safety, keeping our hills safe and clean, and providing emergency response. All funds would be locally controlled. It can't be taken by the state. We'd have a citizens oversight committee. We already have a citizens advisory committee, but we would have one specifically to ensure that the funds are spent as voters intended. We'd have annual audits. We have annual audits anyway. It would just include these funds, and we'd have, public financial disclosures, would ensure proper use of the funds. And the boundaries of the CFD would include the city of Whittier, city of La Habra Heights, partly the community of Hacienda Heights and Roland Heights, and the Workman Mill area. So the CFD boundaries are in green, and you can see within those are the yellow, which is the preserve, the managed open space. And as an employee of the Habitat Authority, all I'm allowed to do is provide the public information about the measure. I cannot say vote this way or that way. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm just providing the information and letting you know where you can go to get more information about this measure, which is at habitatauthority.org/measure PH. And you can go there. Our resolutions are attached on that page. It has a lot more information about the technicalities and mechanics of this. Backing up a little bit, our volunteers that we have, they host weekly hikes, and you can go to our website and join. They're open to the public. We hold 2 a week in Powder Canyon and another one monthly at various rotating trailheads. Everybody is welcome. So with that, I will end 1 minute under and can take any questions that anybody has.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Andrea. So we have a couple of questions that have popped up in the chat, and I'll get to those in just a moment. But one question I wanted to ask, kind of taking this to the very beginning, how unique is a landfill tipping fee? What had it been done elsewhere? Where did the idea come from? Would you recommend it?
Oh, I absolutely would recommend it. It's interesting. I don't have all the facts on where it's been done elsewhere. I know it has, in Korea, I believe it has. And the idea did come from, you know, in the 90s, we had a resident who happened to be on our advisory committee, and he knew Bob Henderson. Bob was our founding chairman and mayor of Whittier at the time. He went into Bob's office and said, "Hey, isn't this a neat article? And it talks about mitigation program from a landfill." And so Bob kind of took that seed of an idea and implemented it here and ran it by everybody at the sanitation districts and the local communities, and it was a win-win for everybody. So I would recommend it. The sanitation districts has been a great partner through this whole thing.
And so you mentioned the sanitation districts. They're a member of your board. Who else serves in the JPA? What entities make it up?
Yeah, great question. Yes, the sanitation districts are on our board of directors. The city of Whittier is on our board, and the county of Los Angeles. So those three government agencies came together to form our Joint Powers Authority. And in the document that created us, they gave an extra seat, a full voting seat on our board of directors to a member from the Hacienda Heights Improvement Association, which is appointed by the supervisor of that district. So Supervisor Solis, the districts have changed over the years, the boundaries. So Supervisor Solis appoints a member from Hacienda Heights Improvement Association to sit on our board. And then the county, the Supervisor Hans district includes most of the preserve. And so they're an employee of the county, is also on our board, which is Ivan Solik. He's our chairman right now. And he's a deputy for Supervisor Hahn. And then we have a councilwoman from Marianne Pacheco, who sits on our board from City of Whittier. And then, of course, the sanitation district's chief engineer sits on our board of directors as well. And then we have a 9-member advisory committee that includes residents from Whittier, 3 from Whittier, 3 from La Habra Heights, and 3 from unincorporated LA.
Sounds like a lot of people to manage at a board meeting.
It's a lot of people.
Yeah. Thank you for that background. Susan, I see you on the screen now, and I know you had a question, so I'll let you go ahead and unmute yourself and ask it.
I have so many questions, but this is sort of the most both animal oriented and mundane of them, I guess. First of all, it's just really inspiring to hear how you did this, and I think it would be really interesting to come up with some kind of almost like a little toolkit for people who want to do stuff like this. Like, what are the possibilities for funding? Maybe it already exists, but like creative ways to fund it. It's both super inspiring and also sad to, hear about how difficult it is still in terms of, trying to make your overhead count. Especially when I just wondered about like CAL FIRE, any of these other organizations, like it just shouldn't be so hard to get money to do good work, I always feel like, and you're definitely doing it. So thanks for providing that model. I just wondered, I always have wondered this about goats. Like, do they get eaten by other animals? Like, can you leave them out there at night? Like, how does that work? Because I'm just super curious about that part of it, but I'm actually more curious about the other things. But I just put the goat question in the chat.
Yeah, I have a big heart for goats too, and those are the same questions I had because I'm like, hey, are they going to be safe from the lions? Well, yeah, they are because we have the herders spend the night with them.
Mm.
So the sheep herders are out there, and they're enclosed by electrical fence, but of course lions can jump over that. But they also have guard dogs.
Mm.
So, and we use various different contractors, and they do some, we had one contractor who wasn't able to have a herder out there at night, but all the goats went into a pen with a 8 foot to 10 foot tall fence around them. And included the vicious guard dogs were in there too. So those dogs are pretty vicious. The other dogs that we used this summer were not as unfriendly, but they had the herders out there with them throughout the night.
Mm.
Yeah,
Thanks.
so they were okay. We haven't had any problems.
And do you know of or maybe anybody on this call, of like a toolkit like this? Because there's, for example, LA County is much more politically friendly, but we have the March Joint Powers Authority, which is incredibly conservative and pro-development and all tied up in those agendas. I just wondered, creative ways of financing, is there like something like that, or should we all try to pitch in and make that? I don't know, Andrea, if you know.
I don't, I'm not exactly, I don't know how to answer that.
Okay.
So
Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I don't know. We're doing our best. We did CAL FIRE did give us some money, or the Rivers and Mountains Conservancy did give us some funding. But when I applied to them both for this fiscal year, I was denied by both of them. So it doesn't stop me. I'm gonna keep applying to them. But yeah, I mean, maybe that's and our mitigation restoration program has been a revenue generator, not a huge one. The main goal of that is just restoring the hills, but it did generate some revenue. So yeah, I mean, maybe that's something I can talk with Melanie about in the future, creating a toolkit.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Great. And Barb, I see your question, but I'm going to move it out of order. I'm going to head over to Jade's question. Jade, do you want to unmute, or do you want me to read your question?
I can unmute. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Okay, and see me. So I live pretty close to the area, and I was curious about the Shilai temple expansion, and whether or not that affects habitat connectivity throughout the area and the corridor. And I was curious to know if they were working with you to maintain habitat and wildlife connectivity, if there's any proposals for like an underpass or an overpass.
Well, yeah, thank you for the question. The proposed Buddhist project, Shilite Temple project, I guess we're waiting on the draft EIR. Yes, it has the potential to greatly affect habitat connectivity in the whole area, and with not only with the location of it, but with the edge effects. There have been some conversations between them, but I don't believe they are interested in underpasses or overpasses.
Thanks.
I guess
Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I guess follow up to that, because I mean, as someone who is Buddhist, whose family has been to the temple, and I'm just kind of generally interested in advocacy, is there any way to potentially like influence that to make sure that habitat connectivity is maintained?
Yeah, I mean, I would encourage everyone to just express their opinions with them. And also through the public comment period with the draft EIR, which is expected to be released by the end of the year, is my guess.
Jade, that's a really good question. I'll add on from the Hills for Everyone perspective as well, because we've been working for the last 20-something years trying to maintain connectivity in the Puente Chino Hills. Severing it at one location has significant impacts to what's west of that particular location, and so Hills for Everyone's been concerned about that as well. And I would echo Andrea's comments in terms of stating something to the leaders at the Shilai Temple, as well as participating in the public comment period. And clearly something has been encountered, good, bad, or indifferent, I don't know, because the delay in terms of release of the environmental impact report has been really significant. So we've been expecting it for a couple of years now, and it just hasn't happened. So we're waiting on that. And then Barb, I see your question. So is there a way we can get the EIR so we can get a comment? So you would need to request from the county to be added to their list, and we can make sure that that gets added to our minutes to provide that contact info. So stay tuned. And then the email list, I'm assuming, is the one for the county, not necessarily the Habitat Authority.
Right, I just need to, it would be helpful for us to know when that EIR comes out. So maybe there can be some kind of collective or individual org response to it. But yeah, we need to somehow get on the list, whatever list that provides notice. Hey, the
Yes.
EIR is ready.
And I will say Eric Johnson, who runs the Point Chino Hills Task Force, is deeply engaged in this. So he would be another point of contact on the Sierra Club front. So I think Barb had the question about the geography of the measure of this community facilities district, and Andrea showed a map, but can you just reiterate, it's only portions of LA County that are voting on this particular measure?
Right, only the communities in the CFD would be able to vote on it. And so it's all voters, although it would apply to only property owners if it was approved. So it's the cities of Whittier, La Habra Heights, part of Hacienda Heights, part of Roland Heights, and the Workman Mill area, which is unincorporated LA County.
And is it let's say the city of Whittier, is it the entire city of Whittier, or is it a certain distance away from the edge of the property line kind of thing?
The entire city.
Okay, so whole cities or communities were included in the CFD.
Right, the whole city of Whittier, whole city of La Habra Heights.
Okay. And in terms of support, my guess is you're limited on what you can say. But what can you tell us about what to look for in the future for availability? I'm thinking organizational endorsements or getting the word out somehow if folks want to advocate, because I know nonprofits are restricted on what they can advocate for or not on a ballot measure, but measures are one of them. People are not something they could advocate for.
Right, as I mentioned earlier, I am not a part of the, in my official role as an employee of the Habitat Authority of the campaigning side, although our partners are, as I'm told. And so I assume that our partners will be getting out information about the campaigning efforts at a later time. But I don't know dates or things like that. But in the meanwhile, there's just non-biased informational items for people on our website.
Great. So your website will lead to the campaign website, or will it not?
No, it cannot.
Okay, so maybe what we can do is provide a link to that when we learn what the campaign website is, and share that with the Southland Coalition if folks want to be engaged and supportive in that regard. Oops. Claire, do you want to speak at all to Hills for Everyone and the measure?
Trying to get it going. Yeah, we have been engaged in a coalition of the Sierra Club and other groups for the last 4 years. And it just has been stalled. We've got brochures worked up and we participated in hearings with the county and went to meetings in Hacienda Heights. And then it just kind of went quiet, partly I think because of COVID, but also, as I just put in the chat, that the whole project got redistricted out of Janice Hahn's supervisoral district and into Hilda Solis's. And so I think the Sheelite Temple proponents wanted to educate her staff about the whole project. And
And
they've
this
been
is the temple that you're referring to, not the measure.
right, yeah. I'm talking about the temple. I thought that, I'm sorry, that was the question. But we've also, Hills for Everyone has also endorsed the measure. And we'll be hopefully helping with that.
Great. All right, so I'm gonna end it here. Thank you, Andrea, for your presentation. If you have additional questions, feel free to drop them in the chat and we can either pass those along to Andrea or she can respond during the remainder of the meeting if she's allowed to. Otherwise, she can point to me and I will respond. But we'll get your questions answered. Thank you so much, Andrea.
Thank you. I appreciate it.